Tonight we have the pleasure of hosting Mark, the bowler hat farmer, and his lovely partner Gloria, who's up the back there. They're on a tour around the UK, Fork the System, very clever, to highlight the plight of both farmers and the huge damage that's been done to food supply chains everywhere. And also to offer us some bold ideas and some fresh perspectives. So welcome Mark.
Good evening. How are we all? Okay, so we are doing a tour of the UK. This is, I think, our 52nd, 57th talk across so far. We've got over 100 to do, several at festivals and things through the summer. And this all started when I started to see what was happening to the food supply chain and to understand what I thought it looked like in the future. Okay, so are we a fairly awake audience? Yes. It's always good to check. I'm off to do a speech next Sunday, and the lady sent me a list of 20 things I can't talk about to farmers, and I went through the list, and I thought, it ain't really worth me coming. Okay, so through the course of this evening, I'm going to cover my journey, where I think the food supply is, and what I think we need to do about things. Okay, so if that's okay with you guys. So this journey for me, for those who haven't heard me speak on this before, starts at 5 years old. So for me, Grandad had a farm, and Grandad was God to me. I spent most of my time with Grandad. I didn't really want to go home, certainly didn't want to go to that place called school. I really didn't understand they needed me in a classroom for all those hours, and I didn't feel that I was getting nothing out of it. So by 5, I'd already decided I didn't fit in. So this particular morning, I go to Grandad's. Mum's going off to work. She drops me at Nan and Grandad's. Grandad says, right, come on. He says, it's time to get the cows sorted out. So, all right, Grandad. He said, but you're going to have to go to school today. I'm 5. What do I know about going to school? So Grandad says, no, you've got to go to school. It's the end of the conversation. You can't go through life not being able to read and write and count. He said, you've got to go to school. I said, all right. So he says, but I need you to do me a favour on the way to school. No problem. I can step up to the mark for that. So Grandad says, you know where the picnic field is? Yes, Grandad. He said, okay. He said, what you need to do with that, picks me up and puts me on the shoulders of a cow called Daisy, who is our matriarch cow. Now, Grandad at that point milked about 500 cows, and they milked them by hand at that point, still milked by hand. And how they used to do that was every morning, all the guys from all the neighbouring villages came to the farm, and everyone had 5 cows they milked. And they came back in the evening and milked a different 5. Okay, so that's how they did it. And Grandad picks me up, puts me on the shoulders of Daisy, smacks her on the backside, and sends her flying off down the track with me on the back. Obviously at 5 years old, health and safety expert. And we go down the road, and I'm only thinking about hanging on for dear life onto the cow I'm on, but glance over my shoulder and see the other 500 tearing down the road behind us. But the rules with cows is the matriarch never gets overtaken, so none of them ever sort of come barging past. And we got to the field, and Daisy in turn walks all the way around the outside of the field, got really slowly, and I thought, it's taking a bit of time. I didn't realise she was waiting for the whole 500 cows to get in the field so she could shut the gate. And when the last cow came in, she just nudged the gate with her nose, gate closed, I jumped and went to school. And from that point on, it got easy. Now, as I say, I didn't fit in at school. The only time I ever fitted in at school when they had a vegetable patch, and I loved to grow vegetables. That's my passion still, is to grow vegetables and cut flowers. My second memory of Grandad was very much about, just cut across on one line, but I do remember talking on the cow side. Grandad had a little Morris Minor, and he decided one day that I didn't need to go to school and I needed to go to the cattle market with him that day. And we bought 2 calves, and that was £5 for the 2. That's how long ago it was. and put them in the back of the Morris Minor on the back seat with me. What could go wrong? And we got them home, and the next thing they were dinky, freshly weaned and still on the bottle. So Nan had them, outside the back door, and every day we had to go out and bottle feed the calves. But my fondest memory of Grandad was when he taught me about magic beans. Now obviously magic. Granddad's to teach me magic. And he taught me, he said to me, right, magic beans, he said, are really important. So he gave me a handful of beans. He said, these beans are yours. He said, and we have to plant them in the ground and we wait for them to come up. So obviously 3 weeks later, the runner beans came up. And he told me this, how they grow up the poles. And when they're big enough, we pick them. And sure enough, we did. And we picked them and took them in for Nan. And I remember going all excited on the last lot. And I was like, Granny, we've got to pick some more beans. He said, no, you can't pick these ones. These are the magic ones. I said, okay, how does that work? Then he said, you just leave them on there, let them dry, and pick them in the future, which we did. And then he taught me how to dry them out properly, tuck them away for the winter, and then next year we had some magic beans. Now, those beans were given to me at 5, and I'm sadly now 57, and I've still got the beans from the beans from the beans from the beans from the beans. And I'd got to the point I'd got 2 massive tubs of them I'm obviously been stocking things for quite a while, thinking about what's coming. And I'd got loads and loads of these beans, the big Quality Street tins, I'd got full of them. And I said to my cousin Mike this year, and my cousin Mike is lovely, he's a pastor of a local church, and he's absolutely smashing lad. But he has got zero idea about farming. And he's got a 15-acre council farm. And when he took it on 3 years ago, he'd ring me about 30 times an hour. And it's got down now, now he only rings me when there's an issue, like the pigs got out. So how'd you get them back in? I told you not to get any. So Mike, over the past 3 years, has developed his farm up 100% organic. And it's lovely to go there and see how they're doing the animals and different things. He's had a bit of a bonus this year because Gloria and I have been on Uncle Ray's farm for, certainly for me, for the last 2 years. Gloria's been there with me 14, 15 months. And sadly, in February, Uncle Ray died. And that has brought a new set of challenges to the table. So for me, having my own farm for 10 years, then going to Uncle Ray's farm for 2 years, and spending a lot of money to get the soil really nice, I've been suggested, let's say, that I might want to stop doing my talks if I want to continue living on the farm. So we've moved out. Now, so at the moment, we are homeless and farmless. So it's a great thing and a great place to be, I tell you. Having no fear, no responsibility, and no bills to pay is really nice. However, there is that thing at night when Gloria will say, so where are we sleeping tonight? I don't know yet. But since February when we left home, we've only had to sleep in the van 3 times, darling. So everyone puts us up or finds us a room, which is great. And I think that also goes to show where the public's thought is on what we're talking about. Because I think for me, it's great to go, I'll go and do these talks, and but who wants to listen? And that's the bit where we're now getting to. In my opinion, the time for listening is running out. And that's my concern. So we've gone on this journey. We've been to Land's End. We've been up as far as Newcastle so far, but it hasn't kind of gone like that around the country. It's kind of almost looked like a bucket of spaghetti. Because when I originally did it and booked the first few talks, Uncle Ray was alive, and I said to him, right, well, what we're going to do is I'm going to go and do these talks, and we'll go and do one once every week or every couple of weeks, at the weekend on a Sunday or Saturday or Sunday, and we'll come back and we'll be here for no problem, he said. Then when he died, I thought, I need to book some more talks. And then we got on the phone and started promoting things, and obviously people have kindly given us talks all over the country. But my geography, because I've never really left the village, hasn't been the best. And I probably should have bought a map in advance of doing the talks, because the one thing I hadn't got was the advance notice of You know, the Leamington Spa, for instance, is near Birmingham and isn't near Southampton, where I thought it was. So that's quite a long drive for that one. But so as we're going around now, how do we get to the point where we are? So I got introduced to the 2030 agenda, which was then the 2021 agenda, when I was 21 years old. Wow. So a long time ago. And I had a crazy friend called Dennis, and he won't mind me calling him that. And he looked like a vagabond, and that's be nice to Dennis. Dennis lived as a hermit. He was never ever wanted to come out and talk to people. He was very scared about what was happening. And every time he used to come around, he used to drop flyers off for me. He would say, "Mark, I need to talk to you about something." I said, "What's that?" And bear in mind, this is before the internet, before things like, you know, mobile phones, and we could just send each other 50 messages a day. And he said, "I need to talk to you about this." And he kept sliding me little bits of information and talking to me about it. And a year it took him for me to take that seriously. And I just kept saying, "Dennis, this is just nonsense." And what I couldn't get my head around was when I read the 2030 agenda properly, that they were, or 2021 agenda, they were talking about the depopulation side, and they were talking about the food and how they were going to get farmers to stop farming. And I couldn't get it. Coming from a farming background and spending my whole life either in farming or in the food wholesale business, I couldn't work out how they were going to get people to stop producing food. And now we get to 2025 and you go, "Oh shit, now we all get it." There's 1,000 things going on which is attacking the food supply, you know. And if you look at the farmers, and I have to say this in the defense of every farmer in the country, if they stick it, they're brave. Because unfortunately what's going on is going to, in my opinion, is going to see 80% of all the farmers come out of farming in the next 5 years. And that's a scary thought. Now, I went to see, the other day, Gloria and I were in Gerrard's Cross and got invited to go and see a farm what makes compost, or compost feed more than compost. And they make it from black lava flies, you know, these massive flying ant things. And they said, "Come see what we're doing," and went to this secret, I will say, secret location. They don't allow any public in there. I wasn't allowed to film. I was allowed to take 4 photographs, and they were to check them before I left. And I said, "This is, bear in mind, they're growing flies to lay larvae to produce these worms, what we might deem as protein for the future." And I'll tell you something. And the 2 guys who were there, the main guy who's the research and development guy for the site, and the company what make the products from what they produce, said to me, I said, "Look, before I go in here, I need to be pretty clear with you. I've been rather outspoken against not wanting to eat protein what comes from soldier flies." And the guy looked at me and he said, "Let me tell you something." He said, "And I absolutely guarantee you this." He said, "Even in 100 years' time, you will not be eating that protein as a food source." And I said, "Interesting." And I said, "Because from my side, I think that's the case." He said, "What I can tell you is they've trialled it." He said, "But all of the people in the industry like us have realised that is not the future. People don't want it." He said, "It's not going to happen." He said, "However, what we have realised is the product that they produce, which is," they say, "if you take 10 tonne of waste food and put it in a 40-foot container, all in these trays with the flies, they turn it into 2.5 tonne of the finest compost you've ever witnessed that's completely ready to use there and then within 10 days. Now, it takes nature 2 years to do that. They do it in 10 days. It was mind-blowing to go and see this project, it really was. Now, what they're looking at is how they can get these 40-foot containers into communities, for the communities to end up with a really good compost that they can then use in their area. And the reason, as they went through the talk with me, and, you know, bear in mind, I'm someone who likes to ask a lot of questions. I'm someone who wants to know everything. And I said, "Look, if I piss you off by the time I leave," bear in mind, I was there to do an interview with them. I left after 4 hours and hadn't done any filming. And I said to the guys, I need to go away and have a think about this and think how I talk about it, because I've actually come here to really pull you to bits, and I'm really impressed. So it's like, but one of the things which they're doing, so they take the compost and they get to the point, so they separate all the fine compost out. All the lumpy bit gets ground up, so it's fine as well. Then they take the actual worms what are left, and they basically stick them through an oven so they're cooked like they would be for feeding the birds, and then they grind them up completely. When they grind them up, they put that back into the compost. Now, what I didn't know was the insects that are out there, or should be out there, love the smell of this stuff. So if you sprinkle it on the ground as a feed, it encourages wildlife to the area. So all the positive things what I was there that I saw, I was like, I come away going, well, is it? And I said to him, I said, are you absolutely sure this isn't going to food supply chain? He said, no. He said, there's no chance. He said, DEFRA, he said, go on, sorry.
Just to be sure, when you say the live smell of the worms that have been cooked and reduced to powder.
Yeah. So
As part of the whole.
yeah, as part of the whole thing, yeah. So, and one of the things which really impressed me, and I mean really impressed me, was the amount that they could produce in a small area. You know, 40-foot container, you stick one of them, you know, next to a community centre in a village, or, you know, wherever it might be. Someone goes in, does what they've got to do, and, you know, there's about a 2-hour work each day to get the compost made. I was really impressed. Now, bear in mind that it's all made from waste food. So you could stick one of those in a town or a village, and the village could supply their waste food effectively, turn it into best compost. It was mind-blowing how they've got this thing set up, I've got to be honest. Now, the guy did a really good sales pitch, and I pulled him to bits. And then he came back with some good answers, and I pulled him to bits. And we spent 4 hours like this, bouncing about around each other. And he got to the end, and he went, do you know what? He said, you're the first person who's come here who's ever understood what we're trying to achieve. See, for me, I went there only thinking about the protein, not about the compost. So when I got there, the bit what excited me was the compost. What I can tell you is that these worms, when you cook them, they cook at the same rate as chocolate melts. So if you wanted to make a protein bar, the two go really nicely together. But what I'll tell you is it tasted like shite. Absolutely like shite. And he said to me, and now do you see why they won't sell it to people? Now, bear in mind that I hate DEFRA. I've got no time for DEFRA at all. They're just useless, incompetent idiots. However, it's DEFRA who has stepped in and said that under no circumstances can they be sold in the UK in the food supply chain. So I have to say, in DEFRA's defence, maybe someone there has got a brain. So, but I like that because it was one of the things we all, you know, I have shared on Facebook loads of times on social media about how I ain't eating that crap. The other crap I'm not going to eat is that flipping meat which they're producing. I just think everyone should go into supermarkets, toss it all out the freezers, chuck it all on the floor and jump on it and walk out. Now, and another thing which I will not agree with, I have to say, and nobody should do this, but we were at a meeting the other day, and there's a particular group of people which go to the supermarkets every week. About 30 of them all go to Tesco's, and then they go to Sainsbury's, and then they go to Waitrose, and they fill up loads of trolleys full of all the stuff they don't want them to sell, and they just leave it in the aisles and walk out. I mean, you can't, that's terrible, you shouldn't do that. There's lots of things we're going to talk about tonight what you shouldn't do.
Sorry, Dave, question that when you say all food waste, precisely, could it be a Tesco sandwich or, you know...
Basically anything with no meat in it is what the rules are.
It could be also some junk food, quite a lot of junk food does, because it would degrade and then...
It doesn't make any difference. These things get fed. So when I was there, they'd just done the mix-up, and they have a brewery that supplies all the old spent wheat, barley, and all the hops, which get ground and put through as a food. They've got a bakery that's supplying bread into it. They've got Tesco's and Waitrose waste veg coming in from their packing plants. Everything goes into these things. It doesn't matter what it is, they eat it and digest it. It's fantastic, I've got to say. So if we're going to take the things what are wrong with farming as one issue, have we got any farmers in the room tonight? Just so I know who I'm pissing off before I start. I normally say to people, tell me now. The problem we've got with the farming side is there's so many opportunities now for farmers not to farm. And that's the issue. So, and most of them will say don't want to take it, but haven't got any choice. And I say haven't got any choice for several reasons. So one problem we've got at the moment is most of the farmers that are coming to retirement age, their children do not want to take the farms on. They've seen what dad's gone through, seen what mum's gone through, and do not want to be part of it. They're like, Dad, sell up, get out, and just split the money. And that's sad. The other side of it is, if a farmer comes to retire and is in agreement to sell the farm and cannot go back into farming after they take the payment, right? They cannot, under any circumstances, go back into farming. But they can claim up to £300,000 off the government, off DEFRA. It's called a Get Out of Farm Payment Scheme. Now, the challenge we have on that is that most farmers, when they get to retirement age, have nothing, only the farm. So they've got no pension. So, and if there's the tax allowances, what are in there if they sell the farm, is untrue. And it's not there if they're in the position that they keep the farm and then, you know, the farm gets handed down. Now, the other thing is on IHT, this inheritance tax. Inheritance tax was just another nonsense Labour flick of the coin to destroy farming. And, you know, farmers have got very upset about it. And in my opinion, it's just nothing. I'm not saying it isn't anything, but it's nothing more than everything else they've thrown at the farmers. You know, and we've seen the farmers have, you know, right, you've got to stop using nitrogen. So our nitrogen reduction, just to give you an idea, everyone's heard about this thing called runoff. Yeah? Okay. So when I was down at this test centre the other day where they were growing these wormy things, the guy was saying to me, he said, what's the runoff on clay? Because on clay, obviously the nitrogen doesn't get a chance to go into the ground. It just runs straight off the top. And they reckon that about 20% of the nitrogen put on the top actually gets into the plant, so 80% potentially ends up in runoff. Now the problem is that the soil is so desecrated these days that there is no goodness in the ground to hold the nitrogen in. One of the problems is, as Gloria will tell you, when I moved to Uncle Ray's, he said to me, he said, right, this part of the field here, he'd straightened all the fields, so we ended up with these big wonky bits all down the sides of the fields, which he fenced in for me to farm for vegetables. And he said, you're never going to be able to grow vegetables in there. I said, I don't intend to. I said, that ground's shite. We had it tested. We sent a test kit off to Italy, and they came back and said, you've got 5% life left in the soil. You could stick a spade in and dig it. There was no mycelium, there was no worms, there was nothing. Completely dead. So I was fortunate that a friend of mine had seen an advert on Facebook for some coir that had come from a tomato farm down in Stansted, and he said, is this any good to you? So I messaged the Polish lad who worked on. I said, is there any chance we can get some of this? He said, how much do you want? I said, how much have you got? He said, about 5 Arctic loads. Can have it all. We want lots. So Gloria and I and a few volunteers spent weeks covering an acre of ground where the first veg patches were, about 3 inches, 4 inches deep, with this coir compost. Now, my intention was that we would just very lightly use a rotera. So a rotavator goes that way, rotera goes that way. And I thought, that's okay. What we're going to do is cover it deep in it and then just lightly put a rotera across it and just turn it into the ground. And it's going to break the clay down and it's going to work wonders and we're going to live happily ever after. And about 2 weeks later, I've gone back to the beds to see how it's doing, and it's completely set solid. The clay has just swallowed it, and it's gone back to clay. And I was like, this is a problem. So at that point, and is there, I don't know what sort of soil you're on down here. Is it quite nice soil? Are you on clay soil? Yeah, clay? If you want to break clay up over winter, right? Get a load of gypsum from a builder's merchants and put it on about an inch thick and just leave the soil to do it over winter, and it'll just leave you the most beautiful soil ready for the next year. Gypsum, amazing stuff. Gloria and I were in Lincolnshire. We went to see a guy who started making organic compost, and he's got 3 components: grass, straw, and willow. And they shred it all, and across there they've got an old runway, and they've got these massive, massive piles like this, and they've got a machine that goes along churning it all up. And got some samples off him, and this stuff was eco-grow. This stuff was brilliant, I have to say. Really, really good compost mix. But while we were there, we got talking, and I said to him, I said, what's that over there? And he said, oh, it all comes in from British Gypsum, which have got a factory down the road from him, and they pay him to take this gypsum away. And he's been ditching loads of it. He shreds it all up, takes the paper out of it, tips the gypsum all over the fields. And he said, it's starting to now destroy the clay over the winter. Brilliant stuff. Now, with the clay, we had an issue. So I said to Gloria, well, the only thing we can do now for this field is to grow on ridges. So we set about making compost, manure, and wood chip mounds, which were like potato ridges right across the fields. And within that, we put in electroculture. So for those who do or don't know about electroculture, we played with it last year quite heavily to see what could be achieved with it. And we use things called power towers. Now, I know the guys, Andy, in that, I know certainly some of the guys here have had other speeches on this from the guys. And we've installed these things called power towers. Now, they come out and douse the field because I thought it was all a bit woo-woo, to be fair. Yeah. Because, dowsing and me have never really worked. However, they came out and doused the field, and they said, Francesco says, okay, this is the in point, and across here, that's the out point. So the energy goes in the field there and out of the field there. So we put one power tower there and one power tower there, and the energy comes in, goes through the ground, and comes back up and goes round. And I'm like, cool. Of course it does. However, let me tell you something. Well, let me ask you a question first. Is it fair? Anyone in the room grow on the veg plot at home? Yeah, food growers. Is it fair for us to have an understanding that we believe in the spring, when the weather gets warmer, everything starts coming back to life? That's a fair understanding, yeah? I don't think that's true. And I witnessed this with the electroculture. I think it's to do with the energy in the atmosphere raises in the spring, not the heat, okay? Because, and the reason I say is, when we had these power towers, and I've got the photographs, if anyone wants to go through them, we had some strawberries growing, and they were in these tomato bags of this coir, and so nothing was ever fertilised, nothing was ever watered, 3 plants on top of a bale right across the field. And I went up there in early January and brushed them off, and I thought, strawberries normally die off over winter. Fair? These were about that big. They were like dinner plates. Never the plants, not the strawberries. Oh, keep up. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, And now we had documented everything we'd done on the electroculture, everything, because we wanted to know if it really worked or not. I'd spent money installing it. The guys had spent money installing it. We wanted to know what did and didn't work. So I sent the pictures through to Andy, and I said, mate, this ain't right. And he said, well, I know that. And he said, that's electroculture. I said, yeah, but no, you don't understand. I've got a flipping degree in farming and agriculture and horticulture, and everything I know from growing for 56 years then, everything I understand about it doesn't make sense. I know that while we have a frost on the ground, and while it's the middle of winter, strawberries should be dead, not massive, vibrant green leaves coming out of them everywhere. The garlic, Gloria said, we sent with the Gloria and Poppy had been planting garlic, and they planted these garlic, and they were just you know, they've got tiny little shoots on them. Plant them in these rows, and 3 or 4 days later, they're out of the ground by 3 inches. I said, you'll have to cover them up because they're going to bolt. No, there's no doubt about that. So again, they covered them up. And I went back a few days later and I was like, oh, I can't have done that because they're, you know. And they said, no, we've done it. And I said, well, it's going to need doing again. I said, so we're going to have to do something because they're going to bolt. So we did them again. And eventually they calmed down. But we ate some the other day. Now, I'm a great believer in the fact that the flavour of food is the nutrition of food, right? And that's why when you go into a supermarket and you buy the shite they sell, it has no goodness in it. And you need to have 3 meals a day because 3 meals a day is what it needs to fill your little body up. If you have good quality, densely nutritious food full of flavour, you won't want to eat that much. I absolutely guarantee you, good food brings you much more nutrition. So when people say to me, oh yeah, but organic veg is a bit expensive, isn't it? No, it's not. Absolutely not. Not for what you need to eat in comparison to the shite out of the supermarket. Now, while we're on talking about organic and supermarkets, let me tell you a little story. A friend of mine used to buy fruit and veg off me. Now, when I had a fruit and veg wholesale company, it was a traditional fruit and veg company, no organic, unless we were lucky enough to find it in the system as we were going along. And as much as I was trying to push more for that, I couldn't find the growers, so that's where we started growing ourselves. And one of the things my mate said to me, he said, listen, mate, he said, I'm really sorry, he said, but we're swapping over to organic veg. He said, and as you don't, necessarily do it, is there any chance you can, cancel this week's box from this point forward? I said, no problem at all. And I rang him back and I said, is there any chance you could do me a favour? He said, yeah, sure. He said, I said, you go to Waitrose to pick some up? He said, yeah. I said, do me a favour, because I had a nitrate tester. I said, can you do me a favour? Can you get 10 items out of Waitrose that are organic that you want? And can you get 10 items out of Waitrose that are the same items but non-organic? And let's test them. Fair? 90% of the Waitrose organic food, fruit and veg, was higher in nitrates than the non-organic. Now, there's one major reason for that. Most of the supermarket organic food comes in from overseas, and most of it comes in from a place called China, who are renowned for producing absolutely fantastic quality fruit and veg with no chemicals. Now, the problem is that their thoughts on what is chemical-free and what our thoughts of what are chemical-free are very different. Very different. So for us, in this country, when we're growing to a standard of fruit, organic fruit and veg, we have massive high restrictions put on us of what we can and can't do. Now, for me, I'm a chemical-free farmer, not organic. I won't grow organic food because the difference in between chemical-free and organic is a £500 piece of paper that the Soil Association have to issue you with to say you've been a good boy, done what you need to do, and the practice is what you've practiced to get your absolutely beautiful food produced agrees with their terms and conditions. Well, we do that anyway. Why do I have to give you £500 for you to tell me? And so I won't do it. Lots of farmers do, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I won't be doing it. And I think people need to understand the difference in food and food. And that's one of the problems that we certainly see in the younger generation. My youngest daughter, she thinks that things like chips and chicken nuggets and things like that are food. God knows where she found that out from. So it certainly wasn't from me or a mum. So how do we get people to understand the difference in between food and food? I don't know the answer to that, I've got to say. What I do know is that over the course of the country, we now have spoken in front of 10,000 people. And travelling round, it's 99% of people in the room are about my age. I didn't say that. Now, the challenge we have is how we get the kids and the grandkids. Because for me, the whole reason I started doing this talk and going out on tour was because of my kids and grandkids. Because I'm terrified about what's coming, right? Absolutely terrified. And if you take the thought that there might be 80% less farmers in 5 years' time, where does that leave us? Are we going to import it all? I don't know if anyone saw this week that BlackRock have bought Felixstowe Port. Now, they've already bought several other ports around the country, but Felixstowe obviously is a major player. You've got Felixstowe one side, Harwich the other side, and I think it's about sort of 27% of all the cargo that comes in the country goes in through there. Now, if you want to stop the supply coming in and you control the ports, how easy is that? So it's really easy to force the price of something up if you control it. And you don't need to control it at that end, you can control it at that end. Stop it coming in the country. That forces every piece of land in the UK up. Now, what I will say is that what we've learnt about composts and manures and putting the goodness back in the ground in the last, certainly for me, the last couple of years. And whilst I've always been a chemical-free farmer, what I've come to understand is, Jesus, shit, there's loads of stuff I didn't know. Genuinely loads of stuff I did not know about organic farming. And I've gone around the country with Gloria, and we have met some, in my opinion, rocket scientists in understanding growing. And they've all wanted to just give me their information. And I've been blessed the fact of doing this tour and going around and speaking to farmers. We were down in Truro, and there was a guy down there called James, and James had come out of the forces and had come out realising what was going on and what was happening inside the food industry as a result of certain meetings that he was privy to about crowd control and what was coming. So he went home to family farm and he said, look, we need to come out of dairy farming. Now, bear in mind, there are about 89 years in the dairy farming industry. And James said, we need to come out of it because it won't exist in the future. They're going to stop it. He said, but what we could do is have beef cattle on the farm. So they put in this herd of Dexters. And anyone familiar with Dexter cows? Because I used to have one and she thought she was a fucking show jumping horse. If she couldn't get over the fence, she could get through it, and she was a nightmare. She charged the police helicopter one night, and I had to shoot her. That was she tasted lovely. No, she tasted lovely. Don't she was a cow. Where my farm was just off the side of the A14 heading from Bury to Ipswich and Felixstowe, and if a cattle gets onto the main road and the police shoot it, you get fined £10,000. And I thought, either I drop her where she is or they will, so I did. Which was a sad day because she was a beautiful cow, but she was a cow. So anyway, they put these Dexter cows on the farm, and when we were down there, James was then breeding some chicks for broilers. And I said to myself, what's the game plan? And like Gloria will tell you, last year, I built some polytunnel frames on some wooden skids. So you've got a wooden frame on the bottom, polytunnel hoops on, the whole thing's wired in with chicken wire, and then a plastic sheet over the top, door on the end, so they're solid to the ground so fox can't dig underneath them. And you put the turkeys in, and every day you move the turkeys on fresh grass. And every day they eat the grass, strip it to the ground, and move on to the next section, move on to the next section. So we could do that a couple of times a day, they'd be moved. Now, I built 2 of these tunnels, and we bred some turkeys, and Gloria will tell you they were more like rhea. I don't know if anyone knows, like rhea's like a small ostrich, and these turkeys were mammoth. So they all weighed in about 29 to 30 pound a piece, fed predominantly on grass. And people say to me, oh, that's just ridiculous feeding turkeys on grass. Yeah, that was definitely a stupid thing to do. Meat was superb. And cost of production, £75 a turkey, with the food and everything what they had, but we were selling them £120 a bird because they were free range, chemical free, grass fed, and people loved them. We didn't have one person who didn't say, wow, best meat I've ever had. So this year, going back to cousin Mike, I thought to myself, these things were about 15, 16 foot wide, and they were too wide to move on a transport, and I needed to get them from my farm to his. So I said to him, look, Mike, you're either going to have to pay for a transporter or you're going to have to take them to bits. So he went and they bought £1,000 to move them by transporter. And he went and, bless him, he took them over the course of 3 days, took them all to bits and rebuilt them on his farm. And now his chickens are in them. So he's got broilers in his for food production. So it's lovely to see how, whilst we have had to pull the farm to bits, the stuff's gone other places and got used. Now, what James was saying, sorry, back to Cornwall. What James was saying is that having the cows on the meadows, because net zero, we all have thoughts on it. I know what I think is bollocks and it's a scam. But farmers are being pushed and pushed to believe it's true. Now, those who don't believe it's true still have to take place in the nonsense, because for DEFRA's recording, we have to say how much carbon we've captured. This is serious. This is, you might laugh, this is a very serious topic, you know. I just think it's highly hilarious. On my farm, when I had the big farm, we had loads and loads of polytunnels, and we used to release gas cylinders of carbon dioxide to make stuff grow. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I was at school, carbon was the gas of life. Isn't that interesting? Not anymore, it's the enemy. So we have to now start looking at, when we used to grow grass, ryegrass or clover, the roots would probably go down about 2-3 inches deep at the most. So all the carbon was only in the top of the soil. Now, if you've got compact soil, what you want is the root structure to get into the ground and break the ground up, right? Now they come along with lays. Now, lays is used in things like plantains and dock leaves and different grasses that really, really push the roots down 10, 12 inches deep. Great thing about that, it breaks the ground up, puts the carbon down further in the ground. So when you do get your plants on it, the carbon's then deeper in the ground and the nitrogen's deeper in the ground out of the legumes in it, that will then help things grow. So DEFRA has done certain things that are working, I will say. Now that pisses me off because I hate them. So what James was saying is they've got the cows on the field. Now he's got these chicken houses like we got, but he's a posh, because he's got solar panels on and wheels on, and they go down the field themselves. Over the course of the day, they move about sort of 25, 30 foot. So the grasses and all the chickens, once they've munched all the grass, they all line up. It's comical because they line up as they know it's moving forward. They're like little combines going along with the side of the thing. Now, the great thing about that is they're fertilising the soil at the same time. Now, what he's doing is he's running his behind the cattle. So the cattle go along, they graze down to 4 or 5 inches deep, and then the chickens go across, taking the grass down to 0 and fertilising as they're going, scrapping up all the cow muck and everything else, taking the bugs out, what are not needed, and getting really good quality, healthy grass-fed birds. So some of the things farmers are starting to do are almost practices what were in place 100 years ago. And that's what we're seeing with farming. Now, one of the other things I will say about losing 80% of the farmers, where we come from, in East Anglia, we don't grow any food. And that sounds a bit silly, but work with me here. We grow wheat, barley, sugar beet, oats, maize, and rapeseed. Everything there goes for processing for supermarkets. None of it you eat directly. It can't be used for animal feed directly unless it's processed. It's no good to man or beast. Now the problem is for me with that is if we lose 80% of the farming industry, What we're actually losing is all the processed shit that we don't want. All right? Now, what we now need to do is get the farmers what are left to understand what they could and should grow, in my opinion. We need to go back to growing vegetables. We need to have mixed farms. We need animals back on the farms. If farmers were to then step up to the plate of what I think needs to happen with the getting the animals back on the ground. Now, we know that's an issue because obviously they fart, and farting cows is a problem because they cause methane, and methane's terrible for greenhouse gases. So, we obviously have to eliminate them. Now, that brings me to another subject because I believe one of the things which I think is going to happen this winter, and this comes from the research, and I've done videos on this along with Gareth Wynne Jones and Tim Taylor from Pro Farm in UK. I had a phone call from a friend and he said to me, you know, back in the 80s, I was on the killing team for the BSE. And I said, yep. He said, why would DEFRA want to know if I still hold my guns and licenses because they may need my assistance in the future? I said, well, they'd only want to know that for one reason. He said, you don't need to tell me, I know. He said, but now you know, do something about it. So
Can you say more?
I will. So what they did during the 80s when BSE was a big thing and they decided they were going to cull all the animals, they had marksmen that worked for the government going out killing all the animals, okay? Those marksman teams and new teams have been put together. Now, the problem that DEFRA has is that the British vets are waking up to what's going on. So they're replacing all the vets and putting Spanish and Bulgarian and all sorts of other vets in that will toe the line to get in the country and will just say, yes, they've got bird flu, yes, they've got TB, yes, they've got... So if most of the way they test this shit is for PCR tests, we all know how reliable they are. So I put a video out saying, I don't know if anyone else has heard anything about this, but we've had this message come from a friend of mine. And that night the video went out. 2 people contacted me on YouTube and said, Mark, just so you know, we import logs into the UK, railway sleepers, stuff like that, and DEFRA have had us stockpiling it for months. So we know what's coming. Or we think we know what's coming. Now, at the time, we put it out and it stopped what bullshit was going on at the time. It stopped it dead. However, there has been outbreaks across Europe. There'll always be a vet who will say there was something wrong, especially if you pay them enough. A bit like scientists and climate change, isn't it? So I think this winter that British farming is going to take the biggest kicking it's ever had. And I think we're going to lose a huge amount of animals this winter. And I mean huge amount.
I guess one person died of bird flu in America.
Allegedly.
30 million.
Yeah, allegedly died of bird flu. Yeah. I mean, the stupidity of it all is that we all know it's nonsense.
Yeah.
And I don't know anyone in the freedom movement who would give it any time of day to think freedom movement, conspiracy theorists, whatever you deem yourself as these days. I just call myself Mark, Dad, Granddad, whatever. But so there's a definite culling coming. Now, we've gone through the bird flu scenario. Now, the first year when they put my birds into lockdown, they came out and saw me and they said, you've got to lock all the birds up. So, why, what's happened? He said, oh, it's deadly disease coming. That's all right. And this was now, bear in mind, I was awake, but this is pre-pandemic, pre-pandemic, about 10 years ago. And they said, you've got to lock the birds up. And we're only going to lock them up for about 8 weeks. Okay, now my birds had free run of the farm. So I ignored DEFRA for the first 4 weeks, and the woman came back to inspect, and she said, we haven't done it. I said, no, someone's let them all out. I come in this morning, they were just like that. There's some nasty people about. So she said, well, I'll assist you to get them back in. So I thought, okay. Got them back in, 2 hours later, they were out again. There was a back door to the, they just kept getting out. But some of these big industrial houses do get infections in the houses. And this is one thing I will say, because the commercial farming side is horrible. I cannot emphasize that enough. There's a guy who rang me today, Ben, who lives, I think it's about 18 miles from here. I've got to go and see him, Fluffett's farm. They're egg producers, and he said, please come and see my farm. He said, I want you to come and see it. I want you to see what we're up to, what we're doing. I want you to come and do a talk here. I said, cool. Now, whilst lots of farmers are waking up, and I'll give you an example. 6 months ago, I posted on Farmers to Action on their WhatsApp group. I posted some chemtrails, and I got my arse read to me. Sorry? Yeah, absolutely. And I posted the pictures, and everyone gave me their 2 pence worth of what they thought about me and my conspiracy theorists. Interestingly, the other day when the government announced that they were now trialling, I posted a picture. Same picture from 6 months ago. And nearly 500 farmers posted what was in their sky that day. Now that really shocked me, because I was like, now there's been a few of us on there who have had open conversations between ourselves deliberately to try and get conversation and arguments going on there to get the other farmers to wait. Because it's unbelievable how asleep they've been. Now the problem is they've been governed, geared, rallied down roads. Talking about rallying people, Gloria and I went to London on the very first Farmers' March. Was there anyone else who was there? Okay, well done. Now, we got there, and we were there, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour, and it was bloody cold, weren't it? It was bitter that day. And I'd gone down there, we took a coach load of people down, we're like, yes! Take on London. And after about 20 minutes, 30 minutes being down there, I said to Gloria, it's cold here, isn't it? And have you noticed that everyone who's going on that stage, so, right, we had the Labour Party went up and said, give us a chance because we've only just got into power, we've got to try and sort things out. We had the Conservatives who said, what you've got to do is get us back into power and we'll sort it out. And it's like, well, you lot picked it up for the last 15 years. And they wouldn't let Nigel on stage. Now, not that I think he's the answer, but they at least did have an agricultural policy worth reading before the election. And it just, the nonsense went on. Now, the other side of the nonsense is that the NFU, we all know the NFU stands for no feckin' use, and they're good at it. They completely ruled the show. So after about 30 minutes, I said to Gloria, I'm going home. I know the coach is somewhere. Messaged the coach driver, he said, we're sitting up the road. So I think by the time we got some lunch and got up there, we were there an hour and a half, something like that. Rounded up all the crew who were supposed to be on the bus with us and said, look, I don't know if you're coming, but I'm on the coach. And within about 20 minutes, everyone was on the coach. We came home early. Then the guy said, we're going back. So, go on. Oh, don't. Oh. The poison dwarf. Now, when that guy said, we're going to do a second run into London, I said, Gloria, I kind of think that we need to go, because what happened was, on the first one, went down, did some filming, and anyone who tried to use a mobile phone down there on the day, you couldn't use your mobile phone because it was blocked. And they'd got us all hemmed into Parliament Square, and they said, and just so you know, we're not going on a rally around London. Well, what the farmers should have said was, fuck you, we are. But they didn't. They all went, oh, all right then. Because the NFU had told them not to go. It was pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. So when they came to do the second one, we didn't go. But what I was going to say, on the end of the first one, I got home, and on the way home, I thought to myself, done some filming, and I thought, how do I document this? Everyone knows I've got a big mouth. I'm doing these tours. We're going around the country. We're talking to people about what's going on in the farming industry. And if I was there, I need to say I was there. And if I don't put something positive out of it, what the hell's going to happen? Everyone's going to get disillusioned about what the farmers are doing. And I said to Gloria, I can't put nothing out. And after 3 or 4 days, people were asking the question, Mark, why haven't you put anything out? So I did a video and said, look, we went. It was completely controlled. And I was absolutely gutted and demoralised by the time I come home. And it's took me till now to have the courage to put the video together and actually tell you guys what I saw. To my shock and amazement, everyone messaged me and said, "Oh, Mark, thank God we were there. It was destroyed. It was a waste of time. This was a waste of time. We couldn't get that, everything what I was fearing." Everyone was going, "Thank God you've spoken out about this, because we thought it was just us who came away thinking like that." Now, then they did the second one and I didn't go. I made my excuses and, planted cabbages that day or whatever it was we did. And then they did the third one and I definitely didn't go to that either. And unfortunately, the farmers need to go and do these things to wake them up. Because what's happening is their farms are getting destroyed on a daily basis. If it ain't, you've got to cut down your amount of nitrogen you're using. If it's not, you've got to, cut down on the Welsh farmers have already been told they need to lose 30% of their animals by 2030. I think they'll lose 30% over this autumn. That's my opinion.
What happens if you refuse?
Well, now there's an interesting question. Paul said to me when he came in, he'd got to give me a hug. It's a manly thing, right? But the hug wasn't from him. It was from Catherine McBean. Now, for those who know Catherine McBean, Catherine's been a feisty little mare, and she's done lots of great things. And one of the things she did was she set up a thing called Guard the Gate. And I actually advise all farmers now to set up a WhatsApp group for the farm and get the local community of awakened people involved, and vegans, they need to get involved because they don't like animals being killed at the best of times. So, and get all of those people. So if every farm had a WhatsApp group of a couple of hundred people, that they could say, DEFRA's here, needs support. Everyone turns up en masse and tells DEFRA what to do and where to go. Because one of the problems we've got is farmers feel alone.
Yeah, but
They,
everybody feels alone in today's society. It's organized.
it's all part of the plan, part of the agenda. So how do we help the farmers? Because this is the big thing, right? En masse, DEFRA will not dare, if there was enough people at the gate, go through that gate. People are not challenging DEFRA. I got sent a beautiful little form, and a lot, you probably will have seen this on social media when it did the rounds. And I've given this out to several farmers and forwarded it on to people and said, print this, keep it handy. And it was a simple form that when DEFRA turned up, you gave to DEFRA and said, could you please fill this out? Happy for you to come on the farm, happy for you to do what you need to do, but can you do this? And what it was a questionnaire, and it said, can you guarantee me that nobody coming onto the farm will be bringing anything onto the farm that isn't here already? Well, DEFRA can't guarantee that. Can you guarantee me that the test facilities you're going to use are 100% accurate? PCR, 100% accurate. Yeah. And everyone, DEFRA go down, they go, no, 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 no. Goodbye. That's what needs to happen, because the farmers are getting slaughtered, the animals are getting slaughtered, farmers then go bankrupt, DEFRA sits on the payments, because if DEFRA culls your animals, DEFRA has to pay you. But if DEFRA pays you in a day, a week, a month or a year, it's down to DEFRA. So all they do is sit it out under the instruction of the government, who are paid by Larry Fink from BlackRock to hold things up in the system. So, everyone can take an active part in this, I have to say. And the other thing I say to people about the active part, I think once we've lost 80% of our farmers, there is some amazing opportunities out there. We set up a CIC, and Catherine's coming on as one of the trustees or directors with it. And the intention with the trustee is to, once we get fundraising with it, is to buy or rent land. Small pockets, 4-5 acres. We don't need hundreds of acres to grow a lot of food. See, here's how Uncle Ray, classic example, when I got there, here's an acre of wheat, and an acre of wheat, how he grows it, by the time he's put chemicals on and fertiliser on, an acre will grow 4.2 tonne of wheat. After you've paid for the fertiliser, the chemicals, the diesel and the time, you end up with £40 per tonne, £170 per acre profit. Can you imagine how many thousands of acres you need to make it pay? Now, I then come along and grow vegetables, and where I'm growing vegetables on really good nutritional soil, I can crop on top of crop on top of crop on top of crop 12 months a year, and I can get 30 grand an acre. And Uncle Ray, when he said to me, that won't work, at the end of the first year when we were going through the figures, said to me, well, what we need to do next year is double the amount of production, get some more turkey pens built, get some pig pens in, get this done, get that done, and you'll be able to produce a lot more food. And if it weren't working, he wouldn't say that. £160 versus 30 grand. Now, what I will say is, unfortunately, and I do say unfortunately, farmers have become lazy. Now, I don't mean lazy from the point of they don't work hard, but they become lazy because they don't want to get out of the bloody tractor. They want to do everything with a tractor. I'm a fingertip farmer. So for me, Gloria will tell you, we do everything with our fingertips. So everything, it's all no dig, all built on ridges. Once the ridges are in place, you drill with your fingers and you pull with your fingers. Don't ever dig anything. Everything's done from the top down. So we start off with the beds and we put fresh wood chip, really, really fresh wood chip, in the walkways. And after about 6 months, when all that as chemicals have worked their way out of it, the natural chemicals, you put that onto the beds. So all you're ever doing is putting the old wood chip on top of the beds and then just replace what's got to go on the paths. That works brilliantly because the wood chip after 2 years is starting to break down into beautiful, beautiful soil, like a forest floor. If you go into a forest floor, I guarantee you're going to find the best soil you've ever had. How does it work? From the top down. Falls on the top, the worms work it in. No one comes along and dig the forest floor. Let nature do the work. So if we could grow 30 tonne per acre of vegetables instead of 4 tonne of wheat, which only ends up in processing, could we end up with better quality food? Now, if a farmer's got to produce massive, massive fields, and again, coming back to net zero, climate change, climate change. If a farmer's got to abide by the rules, we have to set a certain amount of trees, we have to put in a certain amount of hedgerows, we have to put in a certain amount of ponds now. Well, that is a relevant point. The problem is, years ago, farmers did not understand the damage they were creating. And where we come from in East Anglia, Guru will tell you, I don't know if anyone's been up to East Anglia lately, but every field, what you'll go past is 100, 200 acres. There's not a hedgerow in sight. It's absolute carnage and desecration. The other thing, what we don't have in East Anglia now, and I go back to when I was a kid, Grandad had the 500 cows, Mrs. Butcher had 300 cows, Terry Clements and Gerald Clements had 10,000 pigs in sheds, but they had the pigs. The Duchesnes had pigs, the Farrow family had pigs, and there was a family who had chickens, ducks and geese and stuff. Now there's nothing. Nothing at all. One lady's got a donkey and she won't let me eat it. So we have the challenge now, there isn't the amount of animals. They want farmers to get rid of nitrogen, but what are they going to put on the ground instead? So farmers are starting to go, if I can't do A, then I can't do B. What are the other options? Now, as I'm travelling around the country and get to meet these guys the other day with a worm farm, mind-blowing. You could set one of them up on a farm because you only literally have to put a dusting of this stuff on the ground to put the nitrogen back on the ground. So this isn't something you've got to put on at 3 or 4 inches deep. It's dusting. It was mind-blowing. They'd also got, one of the problems that we end up with runoff especially is because of fertilisers, is because the soil won't hold the water. And they showed me a stuff they'd made down there the other day, and it looked like coffee granules. And I said to him, well, what is it? He said, it's magic dust. I said, well, what is it? He said, and this company's called MAD. You look them up on social media, they're called MAD. They're big on TikTok. MAD, and they go, mad growers, mad farmers, that everything's about being mad about farming, mad about growing. And they got these two massive, great big glass cylinders, and they filled them both with the same amount of compost. Same compost, I filled them up, but the difference being, in the second one, we got this brown dusty stuff and just mixed it in, right? Put it in the 2 jars, sat it over 2 measuring jugs, and then filled them both with 2 litres of water. First one, the compost, it went straight through. 1.5 litres straight out the bottom within 30 seconds. The other side, 1/4 litre out of the bottom after 5 minutes. All down to these granules. Now, these granules hold 30 times their body weight in water. Now, if farmers could only see what's going on other places, if farmers can only understand there is other options to producing food, the cost of this composty stuff, the feed, and this water stuff, what can be mixed in with it to put it onto the ground, was about £500 an acre, and it lasts 10 years. We put nitrogen on, about £180 an acre's cost, 3 times a year, so 540 quid, and we do it year. See, the problem is that farmers have become very complacent about the way they work. So when I went to university, I went and I was taught this is how farming works. So we start over here at the start of the season, and because we're on heavy clay and because the soil's so depleted, Uncle Ray rings and he says, we're going in an hour. And we have a timeline of exactly 2 weeks before the clay sets solid. So, plough. Someone's following you up the field with a cultivator. Someone's following you up the field with a set of discs. Someone's following you up the field with a drill, and somebody's following you up with a set of rolls. Now, the seed's now in the ground. You're now going to pray we get rain inside the next 2 weeks, because if we don't, the clay will set solid and the grain won't grow. And the skin sets, and it sits there under the skin of the clay until it gets some rain. And that could be a month, 6 weeks. And then the grain isn't growing at the right speed it should be, and it's behind in there. Then it gets stressed. And so, but just adding these simple things that we've seen people are now producing, we could easily turn the soil around. Now, one of the big things that we've certainly witnessed is you can't turn soil round on a big scale. It cannot be done, not in a hurry. It is just too expensive. Now let's look at where the land's going. This 80% I think is going to disappear. We were down in Kent the other day and seeing Liz Phillips from The Great Resist. Stayed down there on her farm with her and her husband Chaz, 80 years old, ex-SAS officer, and he still goes out and does a day's work. And I mean a day's work. 80 years old, I kid you not, the guy's absolute like dynamite. Brilliant guy. But while we were there, someone said, is there any chance Mark can come and do a video for us about a solar farm that's going in? Now, I love solar farms. Now, so let's talk about solar farms for a minute. So the land is disappearing really quickly to solar, and I don't know if you've got any major ones going on down this area, but if you, let me backtrack. In the past 5 years, did anyone do yellow boards? Okay. Did anyone give out the light newspaper? Did anyone put out leaflets? Did anyone talk to people? If you want some advice, and I have to say this, guys, right? We've become very complacent over the past few years. and we've slowed down what we're doing, I think we need to absolutely do more in the next 6 months than what we've done in the last 5 years. And one of the reasons I say is the solar farms, the destruction they're causing is devastating. It's solar destruction, it's not solar farming, right? I will say it's not solar farming. What's happened is, we were in Lincolnshire and they said, is there any chance you can come and look at this project? And they said, I said, oh yeah, what's going on? They said, we've got a solar farm going in there, 7,000 acres. Any idea how much food you're producing in 7,000 acres? Right? We then drove up to Derbyshire and they said, is there any chance you could do a video about it? I said, don't tell me solar farm. Yeah. They said, this project is 150 acres. And I say, it's a little one. But what they do is a thing called scroll. So, you know where we talk about when people wake up, they join the dots. That's what councils and power companies do with these fields. They get one there, one there, one there, and then they fill the dots in. So what you think is 100 acres there, 50 acres there, 200 acres there, is actually about 15,000 acres by the time they're finished. And that's what they're doing. Now, the scary thing about the solar farms are, and people say, yeah, you know, these farmers are getting paid so much money. They are getting ridiculous money. £12,000 a year, an acre. That's what one guy said to me the other day. He said, that's what he's been offered. I said, what are you going to do? He said, what would you fucking do? He said, Mark, I can't afford to keep the farm going. I've been backed into such a corner, I don't know what to do. Now, the problem is that I think what will happen is, as we know, there's several people new entering the country. And we need some extra housing. And as a result of that extra housing, it's got to go somewhere. And what I think will happen is these solar farms will go in, destroy completely the land. So we're taking grade 1, grade 2 land, best agricultural land in the country, and we're turning it into brown belt. 10, 20 years time, we come along and get rid of the brown belt, and we turn it into housing or industrial. And that's what they're doing to our beautiful little island. And we're not stopping them. What I will say is, if you challenge it before it goes through planning, you can stop it quite easily. It's the minute it gets through the planning department and it's passed, you're screwed. And I mean properly screwed. And everywhere across the country, Cassie, I think Cassie's surname's Langford, who from the correct. She's put together some brilliant stuff, absolutely fantastic, and she's been concentrating all over the country on getting these damn things stopped, and they've had some really good results. But the problem is if you get the sprawl, because one sprawl will lead to another sprawl, which will lead to another sprawl, and we'll end up with tens of thousands of acres. And I don't know if you've actually been and looked around these solar farms. Now, like I said earlier about pushing the supermarkets around the trolleys, around the supermarkets, and you shouldn't do that because that's terrible. There's another thing you must not learn about solar panels. If you break one, 6 stop working because they're wired in blocks of 6. Obviously, you're never going to need to know that. Have you ever been to a solar farm? You need to find one and go and have a look round, right? So to keep the weeds down, we use 100% glyphosate. That beautiful stuff. They use 100% pesticides to keep the pests down. So solar farming is as destructive as soya farming. So I don't know if anyone's ever looked into soya farming, but if you produce a mile square of some soya fields to grow soya beans, you kill everything within a 10-mile block. And I mean everything. Every vole, rabbit, bird, insect, everything has to be killed. Otherwise, that soya cannot be produced. Solar's just the same. It's the most destructive way of killing land off ever. Now, our friends at BlackRock and all the other scabby companies which have been set up to take our money away, are quite happily paying over the top for land. They don't care what they give for it. They just don't want us to have it. Because when you understand where the agenda's going and you understand where they're trying to get to, you understand very quickly that it doesn't matter what it costs them. See, us mere idiots, oh sorry guys, don't mean that offensively, but us idiots have taken the fact that that's real. We all know what it says on it. I promise to pay the bearer the sum of. We believe that's real. They've printed this stuff and bought all our assets. That's what they've done. Very cleverly, very shrewdly, over the course of time, they've just swapped that for the houses we live in, for the fields what we farmed. It's horrendous. Now, in Bury St Edmunds, we've always had excessively high cost of land. It's always been high where we are. Our fields were worth about £27,000 an acre, which is very expensive for land. A guy called Tim Weather is a friend of mine, and Tim's a lovely guy. And his dad, Jack, very good friend of my dad's, said to me, he said, Jack said, they're trying to buy my field as you come out of Bury St Edmunds. And you come out of Bury St Edmunds, and it just literally, the town stops. And there's then acres and acres of fields going across, hundreds of acres of fields heading out towards Sudbury that have no houses on at all. And they wanted to buy this one particular field of 100 acres off him because that was the field what was going to have the new ring road going round to the new police station and new housing estates, and that would stop all the traffic going into the town, and this thing would be brilliant for the whole town. But as a result, they wanted to buy the field. And Tim knew that if he sold the field, that was game over. So Tim sat down with all the farmers and he said, look, I have been backed into a corner. If I sell this field, I'm going to get 160 million. If they compulsory purchase it, I'm probably going to get about 7. He said, so I've got a plan. Now, bearing in mind that all farmers have been pushed to set trees, pretty hedgerows and, fields full of flowers and all the other daft crap we're having to do at the minute. Everyone sell me your smallest field so that I've got my land back and I can give you excessive money for those fields. So Tim bought lots of land up for £50,000 an acre. So what's land worth in Bury St Edmunds now? £50,000 an acre. And nobody will sell it for anything less because they know it's what it's worth because that's what the last lot sold for. So we've taken, from when I was a kid, £3,000 an acre. When I was 17, our land was £3,000 an acre. Now, to 50 grand an acre. How's anyone ever going to get into farming? But, and this is what I say about the buts. So, one of the things which we've noticed with the farmers is what's going on grand scale is they know for them the game's done. They know they've got to get out of it. So they have two choices. The land's going to get sold for building, the land's going to get sold for solar, the land's going to get sold to BlackRock to sit on, whatever it might look like. So the farmers are now getting wise to it and they're going, okay, so let's assume, for instance, that we don't go down that road. What are the other options? Because everyone's starting to wake up, even the farmers are going, where's the food going to come from? Now, what we have seen across the country, and Gloria testified to this, we've gone around the country seeing lots of community projects setting up. And I mean lots. Lots and lots of community projects setting up. They're setting up fields that are growing like we do, which grow vast amounts of food in a very small area. And that's one of the things which I think is the success of the future of farming, is to bring it very much more back locally onto lots of small farms, producing everything organically and putting good food into the system. Now, I don't mean into the system for the supermarkets. I do say that because as far as I'm concerned, every little hurts can stick everything up their jacksie because it hurts the whole community. Supermarkets need doing away with. They are vile. And anyone who goes there, sorry guys, but you're part of the problem, not the solution. Everyone needs to be looking at alternative food supply. And the reason I say that is if you are in a position that you don't know your local farmers that produce food, here's a question. Anyone ever written to their local MP? Have you ever written to your local MP? Yeah, several people have. Did you get the response you were looking for? Sometimes you might get a reply. It might be what you want. Now, one of the things which I think you would do better is write to a local farmer. Write to a local farmer and say, is there anything you say that we can buy, anything you grow we can buy directly from you because I'd rather spend my money with you than the supermarket. Now imagine if a farmer gets that. I know if Uncle Ray had got a letter from a member of the General Republic, he'd have not only written to them, he'd have probably gone and knocked on the door and took them out for a beer. Farmers want communication from the public. They're terrified to do anything to London because they're scared they're going to piss the public off who support them. We need to break that. Contact farmers, and I cannot emphasise this enough. There's, 70 or 80 people in this room. If you all found out what 10 farmers around here grow food...
Is there an association with all the farms you can go on and get a list of all the farms in your area?
I don't know.
There should be.
There should. Yeah, but I think we need to start organising ourselves. I've got to be honest, to start putting this in place, because when this shit happens with the food supply, the people that know the farmers are going to be the ones who come out of this on top. That's how we got through the last pandemic. We had a farm shop. Our farm shop was brilliant. It sold £100 worth of veg per day and sold 10 boxes of vegetables per week. And then the pandemic came and we sold £15,000 worth of veg a day and sold 400 boxes a day. I want them to bring another pandemic. It's incoming. Now, so if we all got to know our farmers and we all got to know where the food's coming from, the next thing is, how do we get involved in helping them? Well, guard the gate is one thing. I cannot emphasise enough to people how important social media is. And we all go, oh, I just fucking hate social media. The problem is, it has been key in waking up 90% of the people who are now awake. So we need, collectively, we've got to the point now, since we've been on this tour, we've got up to 75,000 followers across the country. For me, we need to increase the numbers. All right? If we increase the numbers, we're not only increasing the numbers for people who are awake, we're increasing the people that might actually survive this bullshit. Because this is going to be the other side of this. When all this comes to play, where's the food going to come from? They are dropping the amount of food we grow in this country. If you look on the government's website, it says we produce 60% of our food. It's actually 32%. And by next year, that will be just about 20%. Because by next year, all these big solar farms will be starting to roll out. All the building land will be starting to go down to play, because now the government can just say, we're taking that land and you ain't going to even argue with us. Was it? They can compulsory purchase under the necessity of local infrastructure. That's nice.
They're also trying to block the sun out so solar panels don't work.
Well, anyone who think they don't want it to work. Now, I need to, before we finish, and I'm conscious of the time, I need to take a photograph of the room. So, right, I'm going to ask you a question. And I want you to get a show of hands on this. And it's important. And the reason I ask this question at every speech we do, so if you don't want your face to be shown, put your hand across it, right? But it's important I take this photograph. 50-odd speeches in, when I did the first one of these speeches, and I shared the picture on social media to all the farming pages, and the farmers went, well, what's the relevance of that? So, Gloria, darling, can I ask you to come to the front and take a picture, baby? So, what I'm going to ask you a question is there anybody in the house this evening who would like to buy directly or indirectly? So that could be via a farm shop, farm gate, a box scheme, whatever that might look like. Would you like to buy chemical-free food direct from a farmer and not from a supermarket? If so, can I have a show of hands, please? Because farmers seem to think that we don't want it, and we don't want it from them. Got it? Thank you, darling. Now, every time we do this photograph, I send it on to the farming groups, and I say, can't believe we're in, in Lyndhurst tonight, and 80 people in the room, and they want chemical-free food. Imagine if you was a local farmer and you wanted to supply them. And when I first did it, they went, "Oh, no one's interested in that, Mark. That's just ridiculous." Now they're asking me where I'm going on the tour next. So farmers are starting to wake up to the fact. This is down to us. I can tell you now, because no one's coming to rescue us lot. That's a certainty. I think we've all realised that since 2020. No one's coming to our rescue. This is down to us, and it's down to us to be prepared and deal with what is coming. So if we get past the point of our fear, because the fear factor is one of the things they've had us lot over on for 5 years, right? Fear factor is there. Can you imagine what it's going to be like for the people who have no idea what's going on? Now, I have a theory. In 2020, when the supermarkets ran out of food, it lasted 36 hours, and then shortages started to appear, right? In 2020, I could ring Holland and in 36 hours have an Arctic load of veg on my doorstep. Now I can't get it in the country inside 2 weeks because we're not part of Europe anymore. It's the same in Europe.
In this country, we can forget about that. It's the same.
Absolutely. Now, we all know that weather manipulation and, like you say, chemtrails and everything else, what's going on, geoengineering, whatever it might look like, we're all having to deal with it. Now, my theory is this. If, like in 2020, the food runs out so quickly, what happens when that happens? It goes, and that is what causes the pandemonium. That's what causes the fear, the panic, the desperation. Now, what would happen if, over the course of now to whenever it happens, because I think it's inevitable it will, farmers started getting requests to grow food. Farmers started getting help to grow food. Farmers started getting assistance to guard the gate. Farmers started getting assistance generally. Farmers start producing a better level of food. All we need to do to stop the panic in this country is to be prepared. Because instead of it doing that, what we need to do is get it to do that. Because if we can make it bounce and keep coming back up, the fear moves from there to there. And suddenly it goes to, if it took 2 or 3 weeks for that fear to set in, people would go, oh, there's just some food shortages at the minute and we can deal with it. When panic sets in, it's over.
Just look at the toilet roll thing during COVID.
There was a lot of people obviously had a lot of issues then.
Yeah.
So my belief is that if we can stop the bounce, or create the bounce, that's where we win. And I think that's only going to come by us lot going out, talking to people, especially things like the badges, which Christy's lovely has done for us tonight.
But it's all very good ideas and relatively easy to implement. But we will give this list of farmers next. I can't see myself cycling around and then buzzing at doors to know if people are farming or not. I mean, it's not that easy to spot.
Social media is a great thing. There's hundreds of farmers advertising on social media. Hundreds.
So
Yeah. If you go on Facebook, you can drill Facebook down so easily to apply for things locally. Advertise on your local Facebook groups. Advertise on local social media pages. Just start finding out who they are, where they are. When when we very first left home back in February, we set up a website called foodfindershub.org, and that's got hundreds across the country on it now. And there's new ones joining all the time. You know, go see what's in the local area. Track these farmers down. Bear in mind, the consequence of not doing it, we know. So I would suggest that we start looking towards better solutions than not knowing and not doing, and there not being any food. That's my thought. I'm conscious of the time. Should we do a question? Go on.
I was about to say, we do have in our community called Santa Stevens, and we've
Yes.
spoken about the farming thing a couple of years ago, and she was with several farms in Fordingbridge and surrounding areas and arranging boxes, and we're buying from her. So I'll contact her and maybe she can, if she stopped
I think-
so, but we do have somebody in the community, so we'll reach out to
I
her.
think you're.
There is also, has anyone heard of Nurturing Our Community, Lawrence?
Oh, yeah.
He's growing, he's got 2 acres in New Milton, and he's wanting volunteers to go and help. He's doing tremendous work there. And we're also doing it. Sorry?
Kim and Paul's
Yeah.
land. Yeah.
Yeah, Robin's Nest.
Guys, the answers are out there. You know the answers are in the room. We know this from before the pandemic.
I've talked to various people about this who are definitely not awake at all. And they say, oh, it's no trouble, we have these wonderful local organic farm stands. And that's as far as they go. I mean, that's a small amount of food. Who's going to supply those farm stands?
Most of those farm stands probably produce their own stuff, but what I would say is we need to get them to produce a lot more.
Yeah.
And we need to encourage them to do
that
it.
argument, yeah.
I think the biggest shame is I've opened a farm, and I'm quite lucky I can afford to. There's a lot of youngsters who because the price is a lot different. You know, you go to Aldi, and you get a lot more for your money. I know it's rubbish. Some people are caught in this situation.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
What about us starting up our own community farms? Somebody got some land.
Have got some,
Which
which
I
I
think
think
Lawrence
He's got 2 acres at Kim and Paul's farm, and you know, they're desperate for volunteers.
We could get some links on the side.
Yes, you need to collate the information.
One of the things which we saw when Gloria and I went down to Crops Not Shops down in Glastonbury, and what I loved about their philosophy of how they grow the food on the farm. So they've got the community, so they grow 3 lots of food. The one to feed the community on the farm, the one that feeds the community outside the farm that cannot afford to produce, to buy food, and anything what's left they sell to raise money for the farm. And I love that idea because it tips capitalism up on its head. So I think that, you know, there is places out there that are looking for help. Find out where they are, get doing something, get understand this, get your veg in at home, get on with it because you are running out of time. Any other questions?
Yeah, have you got anything or any views about hydroponics?
Yeah, I'm not overly hydroponics. I'm not overly a big lover of, I've got to say. They tell me that you can add all this wonderful stuff to it. From a watering system point of view, I use my hydroponics in greenhouses to have a water level that I could control, and that drip fed everything else. Do I like growing in it? No, it all comes out tasting like nothing. It's just shite.
There's no life in it.
What do you think of Jeremy Clarkson? Is he good for farming or is he in it for the money?
I think Jeremy Clarkson's done more for farming in, I don't know what series we're on, 5, aren't we? 4 or 5. I think he's done more for farming in that time than any other programme on television, the NFU or anybody else. I think he's a cock. But he has done more for farming. You know, I was never into him when he drove cars and race cars. I thought he was an idiot. But I didn't like the guy. But what I loved about the last series, that was the last one where they did the farming the unfarmable, which really went to prove what you can earn on a farm on the small areas of the farm rather than what you earn out in the big areas of the farm. You know, he proved that Caleb's going around doing all this massive amount of growing and the cost to production is just ridiculous, and he was going out and doing stupid things like growing mushrooms or breeding pigs and making a come a fortune. Farmers have just become undetached.
So there's a cost of machinery. He just bought this last year is a new tractor. It's like 250,000.
Keep going.
But how are you going to get your money back?
You can't.
You can't.
You're not supposed to get your money back. What you're supposed to do is get it through to the end of 3 years to pay the lease, and you trade it in and get another one. That's the plan.
And you did get it second hand.
Sorry?
You did get it second hand.
Yeah. I mean, so
Breaking down.
we were at the Suffolk Showgrounds back in last August, I think it was, and they'd got a new John Deere combine there, 1.2 million.
Whoa.
And it's earning £40 a tonne. How many millions of tonnes have you got to cut? It's just ridiculous.
That's 300 years to get
It's
this
just
money.
like, it's nonsense.
Can you put that magic dance on the field of grass?
Yeah, you can drill it in. You can put it in with a drill. So you can direct drill it.
Spray it.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yeah, you can, but it's better that it's in the ground, so that what they do is just run over it with a drill. So if you've got a,
Well, it's my neighbour, he's got no drill, but he's got cattle on it. And they graze it down to almost nothing, and then he moves into another field. It's not much soil there. But if I could put something on it that would make a visible difference, it might have.
yeah, that really wants to go in lower than the ground than the top dressing. The other stuff, what's the fertiliser can be top dressed. So
he
what
sprays
you,
it with nitrates and things.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
But the other stuff you can put on with the top dressers, you get these little grass dressers what you can use. You could do a football pitch with them in no time at all, because they spread about 20 foot at a time, and you can put it on with one of them. And this is the simplicity of it, and it will sit on top. And first rain, it's took it into the ground.
Yeah.
So and then when cattle are standing on it and things, it's a really good thing.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just your thoughts on the People's Food and Farming Alliance, because I know Catherine was very keen. I was honoured enough to be involved in setting that in a small way. But they had 3 very basic strategies of providing resources to help people do it themselves in their own back gardens, so grow your own. Then was the community growing projects, and then was going to the bigger farmers that were doing scale for the supermarkets and trying to turn them to direct their selling more locally and regionally instead of the global supply chains. And they were trying to provide a lot of information to encourage people to do all those 3 things, or what variations of. Where's that got to in your view? Where do you think that's...
I spent 18 months working with Catherine on the project, and sadly, in my opinion, they did a few things which Catherine or I didn't agree with, and ended up going down the road, and they're now working purely on the kind of homegrown side rather than the community side. And I think the community side's where the emphasis needs to be. Don't get me wrong, grow at home by all means, and and if you're going to grow, if you're in a village, I would say if 10 of you are in a village, all grow different things and swap them about. But I think the emphasis needs to be on the community projects, because the community projects will expand into the land that the farmers are left with. And that's important to understand. The bit they're left with is the bit what's going to be the fields that are too small to put down to solar, if they go through. The fields that BlackRock don't want to buy because it's no good. The challenge we've got is on the land grabbing side is that the government's been really sneaky. They've brought in things called SFIs and SSIs and different things, different schemes. If we get an SSI, which is a site of scientific interest, we now can't farm near that. Right? So they state that field over there, that 500 acres over there is, it's got an endangered species or whatever nonsense they come up with, and we then can't farm within, some cases, 20 miles of it. You've also got the other side, that one of the things DEFRA's just recently brought out, I don't know if anyone's seen this yet, but this comes into play later this year. If you've got soil as a farmer that has either got forever chemicals on it, waste plastic in it, or aluminium in it, all things that might fall from above, let's say, they come and test your soil, and if they find any 3 of those things in it, And for all the farmers who have been putting human waste on their land, they are screwed. So what they do is they come out and analyse your soil and say, well, you're high on this, and high on this. You have to take this soil out of circulation for growing food for the next 12 years. You look across the country and you can see how they're getting rid of a lot of land. And that's what I say about losing 80% of farmers, you start to understand why. And that's why I think the community projects will fit into a lot of those holes, what are left. And that's going to be the way out. Young lady.
Can I ask you something about some home gardening, which is two things. One, how did you cope with aphids on raw beans? And what do you do about slugs? Hampshire, I have every slug in Hampshire in my garden. Try putting a mulch down, you know, honestly, it's not no.
Have you ever heard of a thing called elephant grass? Elephant grass.
Yeah.
Okay. Elephant grass is a grain which you grow on the farms. It takes 2 years to come to fruition rather than 1 year. Grows to about 8 foot tall, and they shred it. And it is nasty stuff. So the whole thing is like thistles. So the stalk of it is like thistles. I absolutely guarantee you, if you put that down as a mulch, you will not have slugs. I do not know who sells it, but it's elephant grass is the stuff to use, and that's real spiky. You can't put it down without gloves on, I'll tell you now. And don't get on your hands and knees to weed.
We've been trying stuff called strulch. Have you come across that?
It's a straw mulch, is it?
Yeah, it's a straw mulch, and it's got iron and something else in it. And we put it under our strawberries, and they're not being eaten this year.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it has been relatively a dry year, so slugs are not overly productive. But
no.
We didn't have many.
Yeah. Back to your point about the aphids, though. One of the things I found with the electroculture is, and when I was talking to these guys the other day, they were saying after putting this black dusty stuff down from the maggie things, that they no longer have to deal with, and like we found with the electroculture and using the amount of, because we were chemical free, when the plants are really healthy, they don't get attacked. And the reason I say that is because, have you ever heard of chitin? Chitin, however you pronounce it. Yeah. So this is one of the chemicals that comes out of these bugs, out of these little worms. That's a chemical reaction. So that's one of the reasons they say we can't eat this stuff. What people don't know is you can take it out, right? So, but that makes leaves on plants really glossy and beautiful, thick green leaves. Now, aphids can only do that. They can't chew, they can't chomp, they can only take a bite. Now bear in mind they're only tiny little things with a tiny little mouth. If you can get the leaf to be healthy and thick, they can't bite it. So they go away. And that's one of the things which, when I got to this place the other day, I was talking to the guy and saying, oh, we did this electroculture, beautiful green leaves, and aphids didn't eat anything. He said, but do you know why? No. I said, let me tell you. So he did. And that's the reason. So the thicker the leaves you can get and the more glossier leaves you can get, and this chitin, however you want to pronounce it, you can buy it as a powder you put about on the ground, and it just gets into the plant, and the plant takes it up, and the plant then gets healthier, and the flies stay away. They go and attack fields instead for farmers. Young lady.
Where do they get the flies?
They breed them on the farm.
Can we get flies like that?
I don't know, but what I will say is you're going to have to like flies. Inside it, they've got nets upon nets upon nets upon nets upon nets, full of thousands upon thousands of flies. And the flies, so they've got in the back of the container, they've got these nets what are producing the eggs. The eggs are taken out and put into the food waste, and the food waste turns it into compost. The flies turn it into compost, and they sieve them out. And so, providing you don't mind maggots, providing you don't mind flies, easy.
Well, maybe on a smaller scale.
If you look on YouTube, black soldier flies, Gloria found buckets of videos on YouTube and TikTok, was it? Instagram. Oh, they're all, I know they're on YouTube as well. And some of these, you know, in Africa, some of these guys who are running these farms are very basic of what they're doing. You can buy the eggs online, so you know. But one tiny little pile of eggs, which was about this big, has about 300 maggots in it. So, they're, any other questions?
The concept you were talking about that they're doing with the flies and the maggots and the water holding molecules and things, it sounds brilliant, but obviously the government aren't going to want us to create local farms and grow our own food, so why would they not going to create a law that says it's illegal and you can't do it?
I don't think that's the case. I think they do want us to produce our food. Interesting concept? I think they want us to produce our food, and that's the issue. Because as we move forward, there will not be big farms, there will not be... I've got a friend who works for Tesco's, right, and Chris is a fantastic guy, and Chris has an understanding of how Tesco's works because he's been there for years, and he now runs about 60 stores. And Tesco's stores, which are very big, as we know, will not be very big in the future. They will only have a Tesco's Express at the front, and the rest of it will all be run by robots, picking the orders, what are delivered on robotic lorries, delivering to your door, and it'll all be synthetic food, all produced in labs. We know where that's going. So I think what we're going to do is create the alternative system, and I don't think the government will be stopping it. All of these projects that I've been out to see are funded by the government. Everything DEFRA's doing at the minute is about getting goodness back in the soil. It's about getting the hedgerows back in to get the insects back and get the birds back. It's all about getting it back to where we need to be. The problem is, what they haven't given thought to is we have a transition to make in agriculture. And farmers are either going to transition from chemical farming to chemical-free farming. And they're going to change what they produce. Or they're going to come out of farming. So everything for the farmers is being geared to push them away from chemical farming. Everything's been pushed to gear them to smaller farms and less chemicals being used. So everything is actually being geared in the right direction. But the problem is they're not doing it on scale. So the problem is we're going to go from 100%, 60%, 30%, 20%, we'll get down to 10% food produced in the country. And if they drop the system in that time, we're at it. We all know that.
What about all the chemicals they're using on those solar farms? It's going to wipe out.
It'll wipe out everything around. That's what I'm saying. That's why it's important for them to be able to get all the land around them and not have no patches of farmland in it, because there won't be nothing any good inside.
So huge deserts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the chemicals, what these things release, is just untrue. If a panel breaks.
So how long do you think we got until this?
I think this winter we're going to lose all the animals.
Really? That soon?
Yeah. And I'm not the only farmer who thinks it. You start asking people like Gareth Wyn Jones, start asking Tim. They're all making provisions on what's going on. A whole lot of them.
There's like millions of people all working for these companies. Don't they understand what?
No, they don't.
They don't understand what
they
they're
don't,
doing.
and they're not interested in wanting to understand. They're all just the sheep, unfortunately. And this is why I say our responsibility is to wake these people up. And that is down to us oldies. Yeah.
Yeah, so on the way into Bournemouth, they've got these signs at the side of the road. They say, animal disease exclusion zone. And a bit further in it says, end of animal disease exclusion
Well, we
zone.
don't know why.
What's all that?
Interesting. Well, this is how they put the fear into people, isn't it? We had exactly the same things appeared around Bury St Edmunds, and I did videos about it. And a friend of mine who works for DEFRA, Dottie, she saw it on Facebook and she said to me, "You do know why they're doing that, don't you?" I said, "Well, I've got a good idea, but you know, it's about fear factor." She said, "That's all it is."
Yeah, no one in the area on Mevars doesn't know.
No one knows. And there was another one. Our village green suddenly, I came across the village green one morning and it said, can you remember what it was down on Horsley Green when we left my mum's? Was it? Wasn't scientific interest? It said that it was nature reserve, wasn't it?
Oh yeah.
Well, the minute it's a nature reserve, you can swap it into an SSI, and then when it's an SSI, you can do what you want with it. So, and you know, the village green, which is about 5 acres, sits right in the middle of the village, in the middle of all the agricultural land. So if they swap that to an SSI, you can't grow within 20 miles.
You just when you understand what the game plan is, it's easy to understand what the game is. And that's where you can challenge it. So for me, I went on Facebook and hit it really hard for a few days until one of the town councillors came back to me and said, Mark, I'll look into it. And her dad was the mayor of the town, and Becky's lovely. And she said, I'll find out what's going on. And she came back to me, she said, oh, that's nothing to worry about. She said, they've put them up because they've got road diversions going on at the time. So what they'd done was to stop people driving on the village green, because it was only a single traffic. They didn't want people driving on the green. They put that up so people would stay off the grass. And since they've disappeared. Now, would they have disappeared if I hadn't challenged it? Who knows?
Just going back to this stimulating the community projects, and then you've got big farmers, well, farmers with an F, having a lot of land that they've not sold yet or whatever. What do you think about the idea of going to them and saying, could we have some of that land for a community project?
100%.
Start doing these sorts of things that you talked about, and then they can see by looking on their own land that that's producing more.
Yes.
Is there a strategy around that could work?
If there is, I'm sure Catherine and I can put one together. I think that's the way forward, 100%. You get a group of you together who are interested in doing something, find other people in the community that are interested in doing it, and then go to farmers and find a farmer who wants to let you have it.
Because the stopping point seems to be, where do we get the land from? But the land's already there.
The land's there, and farmers are being crippled to the ground and do not know what to do with the land, because nothing gives them an option. They either get out of farming, or if they stay in it, and a lot of them are thinking, well, I want to hang on to most of the farm if I can. That's why a lot of them are going, well, I'll give 200 acres up to solar because there's so much money in it. The problem is, and I'll come back to James down in Truro who had the cows, and I said to James while we were there, I said, I'm slightly disappointed, James, to see you've got a field full of solar over there. And he said, I haven't. He said, but I had a bit of a result over that. I said, why is that? He said, well, that field over there should have been my field over there. And this is what they do. So they had to put the cables over James's next door's fields, the next door farmer, to get to his land. So obviously they don't mind doing that because they know at some point they're going to do it on there as well. So, but what they said, James said, the next door neighbour said he'd give his permission to get the cables, but you didn't need to put it over there. They could put it on his land instead. So James was a bit pissed off initially because he didn't get his payout. However, the guy gave up 200 acres of land. He's never been paid for the panels going in. He's never been paid his rebates, and he's never been paid for the electric it produces. Because the Chinese investment company that fitted it has gone bankrupt. And that's what they do. They just roll all these companies. Every one of these companies that sets up is in a limited company for that particular project. And then what they do is when that project's done, they wind the company up. And then no one's left. Because everyone's sold it on the dreams of, oh yeah, well we're going to be able to produce all this amazing electricity and it's going to stay here in the village, and isn't it wonderful? Yeah. And then you start looking into it. Where we were the other day down in Kent, where we went to film, they had got, all you could hear was the birds in the hedgerows. That's all you could hear. This place was in the middle of nowhere. And then right on the edge of, I can't remember, what was it? Morley Marsh? I can't remember where it was. Romley Marsh, that's right, Romley Marsh. And 300 acres, and the couple what we went to see, they built this massive, great big barn conversion. Their house is upstairs and they look over about 800 acres, and the whole lot is either going to be solar or battery storage. The whole lot. Just containers full of these batteries. They reckon there's 200 containers got to go on one field just to store the batteries. It's all nonsense. It doesn't work. We know that. We've only got to look at EVs, look at the cars and things. It's just nonsense. But people are not challenging it. Get yourselves organised and challenge this shit. We've been, let's be honest guys, we've been challenging everything for 5 years, right? Does it make any difference to us now? If we do not challenge this crap right at this point in time, our kids and grandkids will have no food on the table, and that is my worry in all of this. I've got kids, I've got grandkids, and that is what scares me.
Yeah, and just sort of keeping the thinking going about community projects with farmers. Is there, you described some great techniques this evening, which, you know, about rotations, bringing animals in and all of those techniques. Is there a resource pack or a blueprint or a strategy document that you could then show to farmers that have the land as a community group and saying, look, this is what we want to do here, give us a year, if we can show you and prove to you that this is going to give great yields and stuff, you can scale it out and we'll assist you with everything we've learned in the process. Is there some document or some blueprint that you could create or is already there that people like us in the action groups we want to set up could take to the farmers and say, let's go through this together and see what it looks like?
There is a blueprint. There is one by Michael Tallinger.
Yeah,
It's one small town.
have you read it?
Not yet. But, is it not? What's your opinion then of that? The one small
Well,
town?
there's two blueprints going about. Michael's is one. There's another one which is much better. I can't remember. It's by a guy sent it to me from Spain. It's brilliant. What I will say is there is nothing that I've seen that really puts all the building blocks together. There's lots of building blocks out there, and I wouldn't have known a third of the building blocks that I do had I not been on this tour. So I'm hoping by the time I get to the end of this tour, you know, we've got another 10 weeks to do.
You and Catherine could
that me and Catherine will be able to collate that together. I think the problem is we need to start collating it now. This is the conversation I had with Catherine the other day. I said, because I think I see time's running out. So I think the first thing is the land.
You know.
The land
It's not going to be one size fits all though anyway, is there?
No, but I think the thing is if we get a basic pack together, then you know, so that groups like this can start, you know, writing to your farmer. Here's some templates with some letters, you know, to write to your farmers, you know, for getting land, for asking them can they sell, you know, produce to you, whatever it might be. I think, you know, so if anyone, you know, from my side, the CIC set up, bank accounts in place, we started fundraising. If anybody wants to get involved, I will say, Catherine and I will be delighted, it's getting late, delighted to have assistance, because that is one of the things that we are now at the point with, that we are all starting to understand. We know the monetary system will crash, and we know that the food system will crash, we know what's coming. You know, let's start working towards some better plans. So, you know, we have everything in place now to be able to do that, and the knowledge. The problem I have is I'm really good at retaining knowledge and really good at doing talks, but I'm no good at putting anything down. And what we probably really need to do is get someone who's really good at taking information out of my head and getting it down, and start putting these building blocks together, and people making the videos that, you know, cartoon say, you know, puts it all together that people can see it visually.
You could start in the process as taking Bob's video and having it transcribed by AI even, and then start to see the pattern. No, come on, there's uses, good uses for everything.
I have to say, I played with it the other month, and I said to Gloria, I said, I've downloaded ChatGPT, and she was whizzing with it, you know, writing things and all sorts, and I was like, and I spent about an hour on it, and with an hour of never using it. Has anyone in the house used it? Because I hadn't used it at all, and I put together a proposal to give to a council, which was 86 pages long, in an hour, of just giving it the basic instructions of what I wanted out of it, and it wrote the whole proposal. It was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But Cambridgeshire County Council next Thursday night have got a meeting about funding community projects, and so the councils are starting to understand, especially if you've got reform councillors in, because they're desperate to score some brownie
Are
points.
those councils able to provide government funding to support the community projects?
Yes, they are, and in most counties, the biggest landowner is the county council. I don't know if you know that, the Suffolk County Council owns about 50% more than any other person in the county. So county councils are a good place to start, and they have funding.
Put your hands together.